It's your boy, Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And I'm Samantha and Jesse.
This is Masculinity.
The show that investigates the performance of masculinity in the world today, and you know we spell it with a hard K.
So, Samantha.
No, don't do it, Remoy. So, Samantha, don't do it.
Don't do what? Don't do what? I don't know what we're talking about.
Remoy, there's no way I'm letting you slow play this.
Slow play what? I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, you definitely do. You totally know, and I don't want. No.
Do I?
Yeah, okay, you've been teasing it for weeks, Remoy. I mean, I have a bad memory, but my memory's not that bad. You and I both know what we're here to talk about on the show today. Just...
Well, I mean, isn't it just like a woman to speak for me? Wow.
So does our guest, Professor LaToya Council from Lehigh University. Professor, can you tell us what we're talking about today?
We're talking about marriage, Samantha's marriage, and marriage generally in Black communities.
Oh, geez. Well, actually, Remoy, that's how you do an intro, so you're welcome. Tight and to the point.
Well, actually, after the break, we get to experience more of Samantha's almost newlywed anxiety or more cold feet energy. That's after this short
They're warm.
break.
Curious about next-gen men? We're a small part of a much larger movement to undefine masculinity for a brighter future. Our mission is clear: empower the next generation to use their curiosity, empathy, and courage to build a more equitable world. Join the Next Gen Men community as we learn and unlearn together. We're here to support boys and men to break free from limiting stereotypes. We're not just an organization, we're a catalyst for reimagining masculinity and fostering inclusivity. We're here to help open up possibilities for what men and boys can be. Explore the world of Next Gen Men at nextgenmen.ca and join the community to make a difference. Next Gen Men, shaping tomorrow's leaders one step at a time. Join us and help undefine masculinity and empower the next generation of men to lead with empathy and courage.
Samantha.
Yes, Remoy?
So, tell us, how much time do we have?
Until...
Well, wow. Look who's slow playing it now, am I right?
We have less days than I need to get everything done. That's how much time we have.
What Samantha's talking about is her nuptials.
Yeah.
Can you tell us maybe in hours, seconds maybe?
Nah, I don't do that kind of, I don't do that kind of math, but we have like 22 days.
22 days from recording, so I'm just going to take that because I literally need like every second to do as much cardio as possible to try to fit into my Man of Honor suit because Lord knows I haven't actually tried on my suits in years, so I don't know if they fit. That's fine.
You're perfect as you are, Remoy. You're perfect as you are.
I don't have really the bank account for a new suit to make me as perfect as I am, but that's fine. LaToya, that's our guest today, Sociology Professor LaToya Council. Do you know what you're wearing to Samantha's wedding? Professor Council, LaToya, you're invited, right? Like, Samantha, that's right?
Dude, we're at capacity. It's rough. It's intense. It's intense. We've got like 200 people coming. It's a lot. It's a lot going on. Although, LaToya, I'm sure you'll be a fine wedding guest.
I understand, Samantha. Weddings are expensive. I do not need an invite. It's totally fine. Trust me.
I mean, I tried out here,
Appreciate you.
Well, okay, actually, Samantha, let's do this. What are you wearing? I mean, should we expect a sort of white flowy gown and veil, like go super traditional, or like maybe something modern? Like, I know like all white power suits are kind of the jam these days. Or maybe it's like, Cameroonian textiles, a lot of vivid colors. What are we wearing?
So, I mean, honestly, it's a little bit all of the above. I did get bit by the traditional dress. So I am wearing a white dress, but then I'm changing into a champagne dress, and I'm changing into a white jumpsuit. And then I'm wearing Cameroonian Habesha clothing the next day.
You want to say that one more time? Ooh, Habesha? Okay.
I know.
I'm not mad at that.
Habesha, yeah.
Actually, speaking of wedding attire...
here we go, audience. It's starting. He's starting.
Yeah, we're going to take it easy, I swear.
Okay. Yeah. I don't believe you even a little bit, but sure.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go back in time. We're going to go around the globe, digging up on some of these roots on this thing we call marriage.
Here we go. It's like, I'm excited for this episode, but am I actually? I don't know, but it's time we do it.
It's going to be a ride. Along the way, LaToya, you can double down and help us clarify the experiences of Black couples and women may experience. And we'll see how we, and I mean you, Samantha, really feel at the end. How's that all sound?
Hit me. Let's just do it.
Okay, well, let's actually start with that wedding dress. Do you two happen to know the history of that tradition?
Well, yeah, do you, LaToya? Mine is like, not really, kind of.
I don't. I just know about something about the broom, but I do not know the tradition of that dress. Tell us, Remoy. I don't know.
Oh, believe me, I'm excited to tell you. Okay, so the earliest agreed upon documentation of any sort of marriage, at least that historians have kind of surmised, it's actually connected to ancient Chinese folklore.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that at all. Okay.
Yeah, okay, so the story goes, once upon a time, at the center of the world, there lived a clever dog. I know that's surprising, but no, this was no lap pup. This is not that kind of dog. It actually was a canine that happened to be a dragon.
Naturally. A dragon, of course. Why didn't I think of that?
And naturally, this dog wasn't married, at least not yet.
So is this like Beauty and the Beast? Like a hot lady has to marry this beast of a man? I mean, that's kind of sounds like
That's what it sounds like. This dog thing, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get a spoiler alert there, but yeah, this beast, a dragon dog named Panhu, was the servant of an emperor who was waging war. Now, one day the emperor exclaimed, any man who could bring him the head of his enemy would be given the hand of his daughter in marriage.
So remember that he said, any man. Right? Not a dragon dog, Remoy. It was a man. Thank God. I mean, I don't know. Still a little rough, but...
Yeah. Anyways, just go with it. Panhu, this dragon dog, went to the king and still promised to destroy the enemy. Why? Because he wanted to marry the princess.
I mean, naturally, I don't know if any of this is natural. I'm just going to say, I don't know.
Well, story goes on. Panhu did as he was promised, and on the verge of marriage, well, there you go. He wasn't a toad, but he did turn into a little prince.
Wait, so should we rename the dog me and my fiance Scott Panhu? His name is Kenji, and he is wild. Actually, I feel like Dragon Dog is a great description for him. Like, great.
Run that by Adam. But that emperor gives his daughter to be betrothed to Panhu. That's the dragon dog man. And to make sure their marriage was a lucky one, they dressed the princess in a beautiful phoenix dress and phoenix crown.
Okay, so I love phoenixes. So, like, I dig this part of the story because from the ashes they rise. It's just so poetic and beautiful. I do love that. That's probably the only part, though, but I love it.
Well, legend has it that phoenix dress and crown brought her good luck and strength in marriage.
Lord knows she needed.
Mm-hmm.
Married to a dragon dog?
Even today, Chinese brides prefer like a striking red gown with a phoenix tail as a symbol of good fortune.
Wow.
Thoughts?
That's great, yes. So how do we get to white dresses, though?
That's my question, too.
Well, I'm glad you asked that because, the responses right now have been fairly, positive, a little humor in there, but this is kind of where it gets. Well, okay, it's gonna get real. It's gonna get real. So we got the fable of the first wedding in China, right? And as time moves along, and I'm talking about historians, they discover more evidence of marriages. They begin to realize a very harrowing fact about this particular type of union. Any guesses to what that fact may be?
Well, I mean, maybe taking it back to where, I don't know. Anybody who beats this person can marry my daughter. I feel like we should start there, but I digress. LaToya, what do you think?
Purity or something? I would say purity.
You're not far wrong, and we're going to get to there, but there's actually something else, and it's more at the root of that. And actually, it's that, marriage was probably more like a transaction than anything. Does that track?
That 100% tracks. 100% tracks, yeah.
Yes.
Property, all that.
Exactly. So now how this kind of digresses is historical analysis of cultural artifacts throughout the centuries, stemming from what the Middle East and to what is now known as Europe, suggests that women would have been dressed in wedding garments. Get ready for it. As they're being auctioned off.
There it is. Auctioned off. Like when you go to like Sotheby's and you're like, let me buy this like, 400-year-old diamond that you probably got where my people are from, but didn't give them any money for it. That kind of auction.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, potentially. Well, I just want to be clear though, like to give it a little more context and a little more challenging context, like at the same time, it is documented through like different pieces of art and poetry from these cultures and times that they did believe and celebrate romance and erotic love.
Okay, so like how though? Because this doesn't say, like, I'm not getting that from this.
Well, that's where like marriage comes a little different because again, it's more of the transaction versus the celebration of love as we've come to know.
Well, let's hope August 17th is something a little different, huh? Jeez. Lord. God.
Well, how historians have shook it out is basically it boils down to there were these literal marriage markets. And each year, young girls were brought before a crowd of men who, yes, bid for them based on their beauty. And actually, that's kind of how we get to the modern wedding dress.
So, like, how? Because, like, yeah, how? What? Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like you just got to imagine, if you will, like the most beautiful women get chosen as wives for the wealthy.
So dressing them like angels, like in Roman inspired Michelangelo painting type biblical.
Exactly.
Okay, but like I hate to ask, like if you weren't cute, like what you weren't chosen, like what happened to them? Were they thrown into, Handmaid's Tale, like I don't know, the colonies, so they could just like build and just tear apart concrete?
Well, that may be a possibility. It has been documented that the quote unquote least attractive women who did not get chosen were, again, quote unquote, given away to commoners along with monetary compensation for their upkeep.
Like what? Like what are we supposed? Like what? What?
So some men rose out of poverty for the laboring class with the, okay.
Okay, yeah, like the notion that you would just be given away to commoners because it's like weird because it's like two-part, right? It's like one, like as a man, you're like thinking to yourself, well, I'm not a man enough because I don't have enough money to go to the auction. And then as a lady, you're like, cool, so now I'm just being given away to this random dude on the street because he has no money, but he gets money to like keep me up. Hopefully make me cuter. It's just, I don't, So basically the dresses were for them to like look more appealing to like rich men?
Yeah, kind of as LaToya said, it's not explicitly stated that that's exactly the case, but yes, that is the surmised hypothesis, like that in those auctions, women were dressed. Maybe they had the agency to choose to, or it was their families forcing them to wear the most alluring clothing to grab the most best possible man or the best possible future outcome.
Well, that sounds grim. I mean...
And this is kind of where we get to like another aspect that was previously mentioned. Like we now fast forward to the late 19th century. It's 1875, and we have a British painter, Edwin Long, and he starts studying this historical practice of marriage and these wedding markets for painting. And in the end, he like captures one scene of potential brides on the auction block. And actually, what I want to do is I want to take a second to show it to you, and you guys maybe describe it to me. Cool?
Sounds good. Well, I don't know why I thought that this might be like somewhat like not euphemistic, but figurative. But it's definitely like a literal auction block. You've got this woman kind of draped; she's wearing a veil. There's this dude kind of like talking to a bunch of men in the audience and pointing to her, like, "Here. This is you right here." And then there's like someone who looks like actually they could be a fen person, like kind of adjusting the bride's dress. And then there's like a bunch of women behind the auction block, just like wearing white dresses. Some of them are like checking themselves out. Some of them are looking sad, like, damn, this is it. I don't know, LaToya, does that sound correct? What do you see?
That sounds accurate. I agree with that. And it's actually kind of disturbing watching this. Just
Yes.
white women, or white appearing women in this photo literally being auctioned off for marriage. Wow.
My favorite is the one that's like on the complete right. You see her with her hands on her head, like, yo, what is about to go down?
What is happening?
Yes. Yeah, she's right to be worried. I would be worried if I were her. That's for sure.
And I see the other one preparing to go to the block, putting her veil on to go out. Wow.
This could have been our life. Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very harrowing image, and actually, I'm glad you guys like noted all the white or cream dresses, because it's understood those actually would not have been the colors worn back in those ancient markets. Like if this is Babylonia, those would not have been the colors. That's actually come to be understood as Edwin Long's choice.
So why did he paint them white? Why are the dresses white in the painting?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this is like what gets us to, like, he was living in the British Victorian era of that time, and white, especially for women, it signaled, yes, purity and virginity.
Let me ask you something. Why aren't the men in white? Why can't you be pure? Okay? Come through in white. And first of all, don't just wear the white. Be pure. That's what I want.
I ain't mad at that take, man.
Oh, yeah. Well,
LaToya, how do you feel about this white? Like, is that weird? It's weird.
I think it's weird, but as the young people say, it tracks, right? I think like the entire time I was looking at the image, I was thinking about Shonda Rhimes' Bridgerton and how the men were able to like go to like brothels, or they were able to just not be pure. But the women had to just maintain their purity before being chosen as a bride or something.
And this is where we like have to get our bearings, because I think, LaToya, you kind of hinted on something here, and I hope, Samantha, you're ready for this.
Oh, there's more torture. Sure. I could take it. Whatever.
Maybe it's not torture. Maybe it's a little bit of complexity that maybe gets us to the other side of torture. I don't know. But a lot of this history, as we've been going through it, is actually kind of looking at European, or what's become American traditions, and more specifically, what's become of white traditions for marriage.
Okay. Break it down for me.
Well, yeah, I was doing some research on this, and I found this paper titled "Black Marriage Through the Prism of Gender, Race, and Class." It was co-written by Professor Kecia Johnson at Mississippi State University. Full disclosure, Professor Johnson had a family emergency that didn't allow her to participate in this discussion.
Shout out to you, Professor Johnson. Hope you're good wherever you're at. And your people.
For real. But real quick, let me just do my best to highlight some of the insights. The paper starts validating that marriage, like the history that we just walked through, was this like power imbalance between men and women? Yes, but it drills down and says that marriage is a major expression of upper class white male power. Does that track? Could you see that, especially through that image?
Yes. I mean, especially after hearing that history, definitely can see that, like, white European men buying women as essentially glorified slaves, right? I mean, and that's kind of what they called marriage. So, I mean, I don't know. What do you think, LaToya?
I agree with that, because if you only people can afford to go to an auction are men with money, white men with money.
And the paper goes on to state, like, it's drilling even deeper, like the cult of domesticity. Now, if we're like in like the early 20th century, the cult of domesticity were never meant for Black women, because the economic slavery required that they'd be seen as less than human, or even as something other than woman.
Damn, so like domestic life was for white women, and Black women, at least in theory, weren't even allowed like into that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more or less culturally, and like through the centuries, how this tradition was like transmitted.
Okay, so I've also taken a look at some of your work, LaToya, and you'd argue that marriage can be a great tool for Black women, right? And I really want to know more about that.
Yes. So I argue that, because what we're saying, just like white supremacy, I call it white supremacy, or structures have limited the resources of Black people in terms of like work opportunities, just quality of life, and even this idea of going to the cult of domesticity and what it means to feel feminine, or what it means to feel like a woman, right? Those things have not always been available to Black women. Even though Black women are obviously very feminine, right? It's those who choose to be. We can even question what that means. But the stereotypes about the angry Black woman, right? The hypersexual Black woman, like all these stereotypes that are rooted in racism and sexism and all these oppressions, marriage has a way of, it is very much a social class thing, but Black women who have access to marriage, in a sense, have a way to kind of combat or refute some of these larger tropes, ideas about what does it mean to be a Black woman, even when, and we can talk about this later in the episode, how those same tropes can end up bubbling back up in those same marriages, right? And so this idea of like Black professional women who have children and they go to the park with their children. If she's in the park in a majority white space, and people can't see her wedding ring, they think, oh, she could be like a welfare mom, right? There's been Black women scholars who've done research on that, Dawn Dow being one of them, versus having that wedding ring and talking about her husband kind of adds more support and alleviates white fear, like, oh, okay, she's married, she's a professional Black woman, she's just here at the park with her children. And so, yeah, so that's what marriage can serve in that way, as a safety in public spaces for Black women who are encountering gendered racism and these tropes that they have to engage with, especially as mothers.
Which is like a really funky thing, because it's just an adherence to patriarchy in a sense, right? Where it's like, okay, you're legitimized within the confines of what patriarchy says you should be as somebody who is a parent. And so it's like, we'll get to this later with your paper, but it's like, if you are someone who is at the park with no ring on, they'll think you're a nanny. They'll think that you are abusing the system. It's like, you can't just have been like, fuck the institution of marriage. I have my kid. Or it can't just like, I don't know, be your niece or like your whatever. There's like all of these assumptions that go with being a Black woman inhabiting that space with a child. Like there's so many different, assumptions that go with that. Whereas like if you're somebody who is, white skinned and you're at the park with with a kid that kind of somewhat looks like you, we're just going to assume that you are coming from like a cute little picket fence house and that you said bye to your husband before you got to the park, And so, like, I feel like, isn't there something about access to larger family support networks that marriage could offer me just beyond that, those kinds of like assumptions, right? That obviously are not being factored into somebody who is just at the park with their kid. Like nobody is like thinking about that. But I'm wondering, if you have something to say about that.
Yeah. So like kin networks, right? And so the safety net of, again, it's like you can't, as Black people raising children, not be able to leave your children with everyone, especially if you're raising like young Black boys, young Black girls. I was like, okay, well, you got to double check, make sure the nanny's not racist. You have to double check and make sure like the child care center is not overly racist. So how does the extra kin network and support that both of these families offer to provide safety for children? Also extended family members, also friendship networks that show up and are important. And just someone to buffer or do you draw that empathy and care with as you dealing with everyday issues. I know like in my current work where I interviewed married Black couples, they all spoke about just how important it is to have that person just as that support network. Like, because you just often don't get it outside of these spaces. Yeah, we have our friends, but this is my best friend. This is the person who, when work is hard during the day and I just have to come home, I now have a safe space, right? So I think there's something to it when you talk to Black people and they talk about their partners being their best friend or their partners being their safe space, and their safe space because they just had a bad day at work where they were met with a trope or met with racism, sexism, right? All those different things. So that says something about the importance of Black marriages, right? Or the meaning of them for Black people, given this larger context that they have to deal with.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like Professor Johnson's paper says something similar. So it's cool to like getting in the middle of that about, yes, through the intensely horrible system of slavery and oppression, there's actually this subtle positive about these larger support networks between like Black families and kin networks and friends and social networks that are really powerful.
Which are really a lifeline. right? Because I feel like it's something where it doesn't necessarily just apply. It's like an extension, right, of the Black family and stuff. But even as a single person or like if you're a single person or if you're in a relationship and you're not married or whatever, like dealing with microaggressions at work, dealing with like kind of the larger systems of supremacy, like those are really, really a lifeline. So I really appreciate that extends to like Black families. And honestly, it sounds like a win for me. I'm happy that I have that's happening. Like that's something that.
See, I got you there. You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you that. Thank you. But I mean, I feel like, what about for Black men in marriage, right? Like, I know you've like done a lot of research on that. What are you finding there, LaToya?
I find that for Black men, marriage is equally important and valuable. And so I would say for like my current research is like going to this point about just the importance of marriage. I like to, when I talk about these things, like emphasize couples that I've interviewed or just like, so I had this one couple where the husband, I interviewed the families. It was right at the end of the Trump presidency. So it was right before COVID happened. So 2018 and 2019. And so one of the couples that I interviewed, the husband was like, he was talking about, he's like, it's just hard being a Black man in the US. He's like, in the world. He's like, I leave out my house and just, I'm afraid, especially with Trump being president. I don't know what's going to happen to myself or my family. And this man is just letting white people just get away with everything. He's like, and I get so angry when I think about that man being president at work that it just really just impacts my dad. He said, but when I come home, the way my house is set up, and you think about like Bell Hooks' home place as a site of resistance. And she's really talking about what the home and marriage and family can do for Black couples and how it's gendered. But in his case, he said his home, his wife, he loves music. He's like, his wife has allowed him to have this room in their house where there's like sound is just blocked out. And he loves to play drums and listen to loud music. He's like, I get to go in that room for 30 minutes, close and lock the door, and I can just play music really loud and get on the drums. He said, I have to do that in order to tap into my family life so I can be the best husband that my family needs, be the best father for my children. He said, I don't think outside of my wife I'll be able to do that. And it's so important. And so that one anecdote, right, when you have like so many interviews and you hear like similar stories to that over and over again, the importance of that relationship, I would argue for Black men, marriage is equally important. Also in terms of like mobility, which, I can, we'll talk about this a bit more. It's just like, it is when Black men are coupled with, most Black men marry Black women, right, are coupled with Black women that they do see increase in mobility, right? It actually helps them either if they are Black middle class, sustain, solidify, or mobilize into Black middle class status. So it's important. It is an important institution for Black folks.
Okay, we're getting into something really exciting. But like first, Samantha, I gotta know where we're at.
Okay.
How are we feeling about this whole getting married thing? We've covered a lot of ground.
So far, my feet are still warm. I feel like...
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Well,
cold feet. Yes. Oh, okay. All right. I'm not mad at that.
Trying to be on my literati today. I still have more questions.
Actually, I think that's perfect because after the break, you'll get to break it down even further in 5 questions with Professor Council. Everybody, stick with us.
I actually found out later by a friend that Matthew tried to kill himself after that.
What does it look like to go from a perpetrator of violence to an undaunted ally for those who are vulnerable?
So, that made me feel really guilty, and I couldn't eat anything, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't do anything. I thought I deserved what he got. That's when I started talking to you.
This is the story of Lewis, a 12-year-old who went through a remarkable transformation to become the young man he is today. It's also one of the most powerful things I've ever recorded as part of Breaking the Boy Code, a podcast centered on the inner lives of boys and what it looks like for parents and educators to raise the next generation of men. Created in collaboration with Next Gen Men Podcast Network. Listen to Breaking the Boy Code podcast wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back. Samantha, I'm assuming you have some questions?
I have all of the questions. I have so many questions.
Well, it is your nuptials, and with your whole basically future on the line, I'm going to be so kind. I'm going to be generous here and offer the entirety of this next segment to you.
Wow. Your generosity truly knows no bounds, Remoy. Thank you so much.
I know. I'm so generous.
You're so kind. No, but sarcasm aside, LaToya, what Remoy is talking about in this segment is that we are going to ask you 5 more questions to get deeper into what we're talking about today.
Yeah. And at the end of those 5 questions, it then becomes your turn. You get to take the mic and ask Samantha one question of your choosing.
For example, in the past, people have asked me why I started this podcast or how I reconcile movies or music that have had problematic themes or people involved, or even what Serena Williams means to me. And I am here for all of the questions. I would love to hear anything you have to ask me.
Exactly. So how does that all sound to you, Professor Council?
That sounds great. I look forward to it. Let's go.
Well, amazing. Well, Samantha, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. So you shared this beautiful paper with us that you wrote, your eminent paper titled The Black Middle-Class Family Man, Race, Gender, and Social Position at Home. And you talked with, I believe, 20 Black men, I want to say, about their perceptions of Black family life, how breadwinning works, and how they're redefining that realm to challenge white supremacy, right? And so your findings kind of center around this notion of BPCFE, or Black Patriarchal Culture of Family Egalitarianism. First of all, shout out to you on the acronym. Amazing. And then can you also just tell us what that is?
Yes. So I define BPCFE as Black Patriarchal Culture of Family Egalitarianism as this idea of being tolerantly tolerant, economically tolerant on one hand, right? Saying, yes, it is expected and understood that myself as a Black professional man will be partnered to a Black woman who makes the same money as me, or my desire that she makes more than me. And so that in and of itself, people are like, whoa, that's egalitarian. Wow, that's really forward thinking. It is. It's very forward thinking. But when he talks about social position, when these men talk about their social position in their household, it's either, well, I'm the head of my household, meaning I make final decisions, or I'm the rock in my family. So I hold back my emotions because I have to be the backbone. Neither one of those are as egalitarianism as is economic. And so I put that all together because that actually shows a truer look at what Black families are like. Yes, we can't throw out egalitarianism. We can't ever argue that Black families are not egalitarian. But the egalitarianism is definitely in conflict or in tension with the ongoing of patriarchy. So that's this Black patriarchal culture of family egalitarianism. And the cultural piece is just that what we're seeing reflected among Black men has its roots in a very embedded idea of what does it mean to be a Black man, in this case, in the U.S. context. But I feel like if I were to just pull in people from the Black diaspora and the continent, there probably will be some overlap. Like, actually, some of this tracks different. I don't know. That's a theory. Some out to sea.
That's actually an interesting notion because, I mean, my family is Cameroonian, right? So as I was thinking about this show, and I'm marrying somebody who is born in America, but his family is Eritrean. So we're like kind of like African American in like the literal sense in a way. There is this notion that like egalitarianism only stops at money, right? And so, and another notion that you describe is the moral backbone, right? Like something about the moral backbone feels like it's inherently got that like support, that emotional availability, that generosity, right? But it also comes, right, with this like sense of like decision making. Like I read as Cameron and some other, I don't remember all their names, but they were like, this is cool and all. We're going to go back and forth on some decisions. But if we are getting to a point where we're not able to make the decision, I will make the final call. And that is what it means to be a Black man in my family. So I wanted you to kind of talk a little bit more about this moral backbone and what that looks like, because I'm interested in this notion of like you're like emotional availability, providing emotional support, but it still comes under the cloak of like providership and protectionism, which even though the notion of emotional availability does not track as inherently masculine, right? Which kind of feels egalitarian because it comes under the cloak of this like protectionism of like, or providership, then it kind of takes on this like weird patriarchal flavor, right? So I just wanted you to talk more about that because I was trying to make sense of it. And I was like, she's right. She's right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That is what makes it so complicated because it's just like, oh my gosh, like he really cares. He's supportive. He's like, you're crying. Tell me why you're crying. And as women, as heterosexual women, Black women who often are not, I mean, our friendship circles, but even that, right? There's not always, everyone can't talk about why they're crying or their feelings. To have this partner say, I will be the person who you can emotionally like emote to and have that opportunity, that does feel egalitarian. But it is still patriarchal because they themselves are not being vulnerable. It's more like them being a leader, especially if you look at like with the children, like, okay, you and your friends are struggling with college applications. I think one of our participants talked about that. Or you need to go to the mall. Let me be the emotional person and drive you to the mall, pick you up, right? It's still like doing this very compartmentalized emotional giving. It's like, I'll listen to you. I'll be there to support you. And I'm going to give you the answer as to how all of this can be better, right?
Solutionism.
The solution is very solution leadership oriented, which again, solution leadership orientation is at the core of what it means to be a respectable Black man. I can be emotional, but I have to have a solution. I have to show up and get the answer done. So it's still patriarchal. It's sweet, I guess.
It is, isn't it? And so my question, I mean, I have a bunch of questions about this, but I guess the first direction I want to go to is like, how would it impact Black households and men in particular in those households if they were to wholeheartedly embrace egalitarianism, right? So meaning if they embraced leveraging the leadership of either partner when the situation calls for it, or were themselves emotionally available, were themselves emotionally bare, right? Not just receiving that from the partner with a view to kind of like provide solutions for them.
I love this question because I ask that to myself all the time. And I ask that because I truly believe Black men are best positioned to fully embrace egalitarianism if they want to, right? These are men who know the legacy of slavery. These are men who know the legacy of things like apartheid, right? Colonialism, right? These are men who know what it's like to really experience control and bondage and like Jim Crow, even current day policing, like driving while Black or running, exercising while Black, right? You have like people like Henry Louis Gates who's a famous, awesome professor who does so much for Black people, Black life, and just people in general with the Black Museum in DC. Left his keys inside his house. And the police were called on him as he was trying to get back into his house to open up his door. Really? Right. Former President Barack Obama received the highest position in like the U.S. you could get as a person. And the challenges that he and Michelle experienced in their family to their safety and his limitedness to keep his family safe, even in the highest position as a person and let alone as a Black man. Right. So all of those experiences with what we call in sociology, gendered racism, how race and gender come together and shape the experiences, puts them at the position where they're poised to fully embrace egalitarianism. And so to answer your question, I would say if a true embracement of egalitarianism happened, then I think Black families will experience the freedom that we dream of constantly. I think we're already there where we have to economically co-provide together. Why is it that we can't, they already are, yes, doing more in housework than men of other races because of this co-providership. But again, that empathy and care coming on the back end from Black women, another paper that I'm writing kind of washes that away or dilutes that egalitarianism. What's preventing them to go the extra step and fully embracing egalitarianism? Because all the pieces are there. If we could just get rid of this patriarchy problem, it would mean relinquishing power, gender power, right? This idea of my position as a man is, I wouldn't say there's like, I'm better than Black women, but this idea of I'm a man, and as a man, I have to be a protector and provider. What does it look like if they could be a protector and provider of self first? And which means you would have to really emote and be available for yourself and then let that flow out to everybody else. We have the tools. We just got to deal with this patriarchy problem and, racism.
Yeah. Just that one little piece. No, but I hear you 100%. And I feel like one thing that you touch on in your paper that is so clear is like, yes, there's the providership, there's the protectionism, but there's also dominance, right? And so that's that power, that gender power that is something where, because my next question to you was going to be like, it's incredible that Black men, especially the ones that you interviewed, are intentionally wanting to thwart white supremacy in their relationship by embracing this notion of egalitarianism, by saying, I want somebody who makes the same or more without feeling some sort of threat. But then it's like, wait, do you feel the threat? Because why do you still need the dominant part of it, right? So this one thing that I think about constantly when it comes to relationships is division of labor, right? Because we saw what happened during COVID. It's now the number one cause of, married women who are working, leaving their relationships is because of this division of labor. So, is there a way to get there in a way that men still feel valued?
I think there is. We as a society need to value care work more. Everyone. Nurturing and care work is not women's work. It's everyone's work. And we have to change that rhetoric. We have to change that idea. And so when it comes to the housework, that is so wrapped up in, that's like nurture, care, making home available and creating the ambiance of the candles. Okay, well, don't you want to clean home too? Right? Like it's not just something women do. All of us, personal hygiene is important. This is care work that we all need to be invested in. I think, if it's hard for people to see that, let's look at educators, right? Why are teachers, still being paid few dollars for all the work that they're doing? Because teaching and even nursing are still considered largely women dominated or women gendered jobs or an occupation. We have to change the narrative and what we think about care work. And I think in this case, when it comes to the Black home, right, it's like, yes, going back to my current study where I talk about the empathy and the care. One of my, a couple of my couples, one man said, I do housework. I have the chores that I do, but I'm invested in being a father. And when I'm home from work, I'm not going to sit here and clean baseboards or do all this laundry. I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband. So he sets a timer. And when that timer goes off, that's it. It's what's done is done. Okay. You're trading in this housework because you want to spend more time with your family. But my question, when that timer goes off and you're done and you're hanging with your kids, who's picking up the slack of that timer? Your wife.
Like you think your wife doesn't want to spend time with her kids? Right. That she spent 9 months making in her body? Like, come on.
Your wife.
So, yeah. So that's the thing that I was my big question with this was, why is the division of labor being more egalitarian, this notion of, emotional availability, emotional vulnerability, why isn't that seen as a like a resistance to white supremacy? Because it is. It literally is. And so I'm like, why is that? Does that not factor into the resistance? And I think I know the answer, but, tell me what you think.
I think it is resistance. I think this will probably sound a little woo. I don't know, like with their listeners.
Oh, let's go. I like it, yeah.
I don't think it distinguishes for Black men enough their position in relation to Black women, right? If I'm already going to be married or dating this woman who's probably going to be out degreed than me, which they are okay with, they say, she's going to make more money than me, which they desire. If I do all of this, if I take it to this level, how are you going to know who's the man or the woman in the relationship? Now, I have not done, this is me theory making. This is me going to that next, because if we think about as sociologists, right? People, and we look in sociology, we look at relationships and experiences in relation to each other. People in relations to institutions and structures, and then at that interactional level. So here I'm at the interactional level. What about me in this unit? If I also resist white supremacy by emoting and really doing more housework, I'm already giving up or not giving up, or like acquiescing with this income and education thing. If I do this, how do we distinguish roles, positions in the household? That's where the problem is. We got to throw that out. We have to throw out these binaries and live in a non-binary way of life. And I think that's the problem.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. I mean, I feel we were just talking last week about TV and the stark, there's like almost, it feels like there's this need to create a stark contrast between men, women, girls, boys, like characters. Like if there are more women on screen, we're going to have them talking more, but we're going to have the dudes talking less. Like they're quiet, powerful types, right? If the women aren't on screen, we can have people do like all kinds of emotions and everything. But like there's got to be that stark difference, because femininity and masculinity are not the same. And we have got to maintain this rigid structure, because otherwise, we don't know who's who anymore. I'm sure you guys have heard that phrase being said. We don't know who's who anymore, right? As if everybody's like personhood lies within this like super strict gender binary that they have to uphold in some way. So, yeah, I mean, this was really illuminating. I guess one thing is, I know you're a researcher and, you're into like be present to what people are experiencing and what has happened and how they feel about their own lives. But if you had some sort of like psychology hat that you could kind of put on, I wonder what you would say in terms of Black marriages, how we can support men in arriving at that egalitarianism that, includes in all that good stuff that we're talking about, emotional vulnerability, division of labor, all of those things. How could we support them in getting there and not thinking of themselves as less of a man because of it?
So there's two things. I think about this a lot. Thank you for that question, Samantha. As I'm writing a book on this topic now, and there's two things that I think I'm going to argue for the conclusions for this. And one is collective marriages. The whole the idea of what happens in your house stays in your house. No, throw it out. We are Black people do best with collective engagement and working together as a collective, the collectivity. We can't do this individualistic. Too much is on the line. Too much is at stake. We are each other's keeper, right? So if it's my house and I'm like, hey, my partner and I, or my partner, he's like, my wife and I we're just not seeing eye to eye on something. How do you all workshop this in your marriage? Or even bring your single friends in who've dated before. Bring in people who are older than you and they've had longer marriages. Okay, well, I'm going to take this information back to my house and say, this is what so-and-so said. What do you think about that? right? Collective marriages, being each other's keeper and realizing that we have to all invest in keeping these couples accountable and holding Black men accountable, right? And even if the marriage doesn't work, because we as a collective are involved, these people know that they can safely end this thing and they still have community available to them, that not everything goes up in flames, right? Yes, it's sad, but there's still community available. So that's the first thing, collective marriages. The second thing is mental health support, right? Therapy, access to more Black male therapists for Black men. A book that I just finished reading that I just think everybody who's Black should read is Courtney B. Vance's Invisible Ache. It is, and Dr. Robin Smith. The two of them came together and, Courtney's talking about losing his father to suicide, his godson to suicide. They both died by suicide. And just his own journey of manhood and fatherhood and just how therapy has just been so important for him. I think that book is just powerful in talking about that. In my interviews, therapy came up a lot. There are Black men, who spoke about, again, the impact of Trump, which is why this whole Black men voting for Trump thing, someone needs to talk, because I feel like that's a theory. I don't know. I don't believe the hype of that, because so many Black men I know there's some truth to it, but I'm like, let's have a deeper conversation about this. But anyway, they were like, one man, he was like, I work at a place where all these people are Trump supporters. I don't trust anybody. And his wife is like, I think we need to go to couples counseling. He said to her, I understand the importance of couples therapy, but because I'm a Black man and I've been taught to figure it out on my own, or people judge me all the time, I'm not going to go to therapy and have someone else judge me. Her response is, and this is why I don't push it, because I understand he's coming at this as a Black man who's experienced trauma. Right. Cool. I understand that. But he needs a therapist. He needs help, right? He's saying it without saying it. And so what does it mean to bring in more therapeutic services for Black men, right? And the last thing is friendship circles. So in future studies, I want to look at Black men friendships and how are they friends with each other? I'm just like, what do they talk about? And then compare with what Black women and their friendship circles look like. What their friendships, do they have these strong, genuine friendships? Scholars like Chris Marsh, who writes a lot about singlehood in the Black community, she's written about the importance of friendship circles for single Black folk, right? And how much they mean. So what does that mean for married Black folks? So those are my three things: collective marriages, therapeutic services for Black men, and some good friendship circles.
I mean, all of those, dare I say, solutions sound great. I feel like everything you touched on is on point. And I want to say a particular note about collective marriages. That's how you stop abuse in families. No matter who's getting abused, right? Because Black men get abused all the time. Black boys get abused all the time, and people don't talk about it. And I feel like they're like, this is in somebody's house. We don't talk about what happens behind closed doors. And it's like, no, we need to talk about what happens behind closed doors, because that impacts the community. And that is someone who is being harmed by some of the community. And there could be a way to actually work through that. But then when we get too far, that's when incarceration gets involved, and then it's gone, right? There's no actual accountability. There's just punishment with no kind of reflection or anything like that. So just really loved and appreciated these answers. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Samantha got way too much out of this, but that's fine. That's fine.
I thought you were doing this for me.
Okay. Now, considering how much you offered Samantha, LaToya, it's your turn to ask her one question. Maybe it's about Samantha's opinion of the institution of marriage now, or, maybe it's why she loves me so much. I don't know.
I love you this much. Aww. Can you stop asking about this? I love you this much. It's only because my hands are on camera. If we could stretch the screen, it would go all of Oakland. But it's still about the podcast. Well, thank you.
All right, LaToya, we'll take it away.
Yes, I do want to know, Samantha, what do you think now that you're 22 days out from marriage about not just the institution of marriage, but specifically Black marriage, Black love? yeah.
That's an excellent question, and somehow I haven't thought about this explicitly, at least not the Black marriage piece. But I do, and I've told this to Adam, my fiance, many times, that before I met him, I thought that marriage was a trap for women to get free labor out of them. And I don't necessarily disbelieve that. I feel like marriage as an institution has very much been set in place, as we saw today, as a way for women to fulfill something for men without them having to do much in return, but give money, right? It's like kind of like a property kind of transactional arrangement. But, love to me is different. I feel like marriage is something that kind of is able to help couples wade through capitalism by being able to bring their assets together and being able to create a household together, raise a family together if you want, and bring your resources together to create something that works for you as a couple. And so I feel like the love marriage versus the transactional marriage that's what that means to me. And that's what I'm hoping to create, with my partner. With Black marriages in particular, I think, similar to what I was saying before, is like it's so important to understand where all of those notions come from, right? Because otherwise you do fall in that trap of, oh, but I still have to maintain some sort of dominance over you because I'm a man and there needs to be some contrast between us. For what? We're two different people. There is enough contrast. We don't need to have this like gendered contrast that's coming from some weird like patriarchal tradition that in essence didn't even really make room for us if we think about it truly. So for me, I think marriage is an opportunity to create something. It's like you can author something with somebody that you love. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. Institutional marriage, I keep my eye on. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. I love it. Do I have time for one more question?
Oh, why not? Samantha asked like 7. Go ahead. You got 2 or 3. Why not?
There were sub-questions.
Go for it.
Is it okay to ask, do you have something borrowed and something blue?
Oh, snap. I don't have anything borrowed, but I do have something blue. I have a lot of blue because our traditional fabric is blue and white, like the Cameroonian one, the dup that I'm using. I'm borrowing a lot of this cutlery. I'll tell you that. Had to rent a lot of shit. So I don't know if that counts as something borrowed, but yeah, we'll say that. We'll say that. Yeah.
LaToya, Samantha and you discussed your paper, the one that's on the horizon, but just for our audience, like, is there a time that they can expect that? Keep their eyes and ears ready to look out for that? Or maybe some other old work or some other new work that you may want to shout out for them to keep on their horizon?
Well, so that paper is still in the works of R&R. So hopefully the reviewers are like, okay, she met all our expectations and it comes out in like the next 2 months or so. And so I'll let you all know. If not, I'm just going to keep shopping it. But it's done. It is. But other works, I'm a children's book author. So I have 2 children's books that are out. The first one is Intersection Allies, We Make Room for All, which introduces the concept intersectionality and intersectionality theory to children. And it's co-written with my 2 good friends, Dr. Chelsea Johnson-Rabb and Dr. Carolyn Choi, with a foreword by Kimberly Crenshaw. And I have a second children's book, Love Without Bounds, Intersection Allies book about families that we also co-wrote together, which is looking at different family forms and what intersectionality teaches us about family life.
That's very exciting. I have several friends with young children, and you better believe they're all getting those books.
Yes.
Like, stat. That's really awesome. I'm like, yeah, thank you for doing that work. That's so important.
Well, Samantha?
Yes, Remoy?
I guess you're still making your way to the altar, wedding vows in hand?
Listen, if you think that depends on this episode, it doesn't. I've already paid for everything, Remoy. Obviously, it's happening, okay? But also, no, like, all jokes aside, I feel invigorated because it's like, I have some exact tools from LaToya, so that was really helpful.
Well, audience, I gave my best. I tried to stop her. But the institutions of capitalism and Professor LaToya Council, well, they won out. But alas, Samantha's a 21st century woman who can make decisions and can get married on her own. That's fine.
Thank you. And, oh, please, you're gonna have the best time. There's going to be a whole buffet of vegan food on Sunday, so you're welcome.
I'm going to have a great time. And with all the I-dos and travel plans around the corner this next month, we're actually going to be taking it off. So new episodes will land back in your podcast feeds starting in mid-September.
No reason to fret, though, because you'll be seeing us in your inboxes. Our bi-weekly newsletter will be full of reminders of a previous episode that you may have missed, along with some additional resources that may inspire you to re-listen. So look out for those.
And you know what? You can actually forward those newsletters to your fiance, maybe, or parent, or bestie, or man of honor, I don't know, or a complete stranger. Whoever you think would really love to get ears on your favorite podcast.
Remoy, it's been really fun getting back into that masculinity saddle.
Hard K.
You know, looking forward to the next year, talking about some more topics and doing our thing.
Me too. But until that next time, I'm your boy, Remoy George Phillip, the first.
And I'm Samantha Nzesi. Thank you so much for listening.
Peace.
Ciao.
You should watch Bridgerton.
Do I watch Bridgerton? I'm not going to watch Bridgerton, but do I watch I'm not going to watch Bridgerton.